Omniscience and Rationality. The main line of attack that atheists often use to try to disprove the existence of God is attributive. That is, they shall point to one or more classical attributes of God and then try to show a logical contradiction therein. And if God's attributes are logically impossible, then God himself, in turn, is logically impossible. And I think that such lines of reasoning are very helpful to Christians and other theists, for in responding to the atheistic proofs in quotation marks, the proofs of attribution, to respond to these forces us to think more carefully and be more precise in our understanding of what God is like. Better knowing what God is like means that we can become closer to God. To be in a close relationship with another person, you need to know what that other person is like. One attribute disproof, which is new, at least it is fairly new to me personally, is with respect to omniscience by way of the supposed impossibility of the set of all truths. I wanted to take a look at that. God is omniscience, I take on faith, and so this argument against God's omniscience must be unsound. But it is bad form to merely assert that an argument is unsound. No, I must demonstrate this fact. So that is what I intend to do in this video and the subsequent videos of this series, to show where the argument against divine omniscience goes awry. So here is the argument. Premise 1. If God is omniscient, then the set of all facts is within his mind. Premise 2. God is omniscient. Premise 3. The set of all facts is logically impossible. Conclusion 4. Therefore, God does not exist. So God is omniscient, and if he's omniscient, then the set of all facts is within his mind, but there's no such thing logically as the set of all facts. Now, the third premise, that the set of all facts is logically impossible, is established by a second argument, which I will give in a moment. Now, this is going to get a bit convoluted, so let me just explain the basic idea of what's going to be going on in the second argument. We take all facts and collect them together into a single set, and then we try to find facts that are not in this set, but this is the set of all facts, so there's a contradiction there. So that's the basic idea of the second proof. A. Imagine the set of all facts. Call this set I. B. Take the power set of this set. The power set of an original set is the set of all subsets of the original set. The collection of all subsets of I is our power set. Call this new set, the power set, P. C. Each element of P is itself a set. More specifically, it is a subset of I. The first truth in I will either belong or else not belong to each of the subsets. So truth 1 belonging or not belonging to the first subset is a truth. Likewise, with respect to the second subset, and so on for all of the subsets. Truth 1 belongs, the first truth of the original set, either belongs or does not belong to each of them. To sum up, C, which is the third premise of this second proof, there is a unique truth corresponding to each element of P. Okay, so all the next point, D, all power sets are larger than their original sets, so P is larger than I. But I contains E, but I contains all truths, F. So there are more truths associated with P than there are truths in the set I, the set of all truths I. G, but I, is all truths. Our result is that there are more truths than are in the set of all truths, and this is absurd. So the set of all truths is reducible to absurdity, and hence there is no such thing as the set of all truths. So that second proof establishes premise 3 of the first argument. As I said, it is a bit convoluted and abstract, but the basic idea is that you collect all the facts together into a single set, and then you find additional truths that aren't in that original set, which is a contradiction. So the arguments are taken together to putatively show that omniscience is impossible. And I'll put both of these arguments in the sidebar. So again, the first argument, one, if God is omniscient, then the set of all facts is within his mind. 2, God is omniscient. 3, the set of all facts is logically impossible, as the second argument shows. 4, therefore God does not exist. Alright, so now I want to move on to examine the question of soundness. Are these arguments sound? I don't think I can agree with premise 1 of the first argument, and I would disagree with it even if the set of all facts is logically possible. It could be logically possible, or it could be logically impossible. It doesn't matter. I still would disagree with premise 1. Now, premise 1, to remind you, says that God is that if God is omniscient, then the set of all facts is within his mind. But it seems this premise misunderstands what omniscience is. For example, does God know I am evangelical 1? Not that this guy down here on earth is evangelical 1. I'm asking if God can say of himself, with respect to himself, quote, I am evangelical 1. Can God say that referring to himself? And the answer is clearly no. So God does not know what it is like to be me, evangelical 1. That is one fact God does not know. But these sorts of facts are indexical and may not be in view in either the first or the second arguments that I was speaking of earlier. The proofs may presume, without specifying, that to count as a fact in this context it cannot be indexical. Or we could simply say that, quote, I am evangelical 1, unquote, is true when anybody thinks it of themselves apart from me. I mean, we could deny that that is true when anybody thinks it, unless I'm the one doing the thinking. Okay, at any rate, we do need to be careful when formulating the attribute of omniscience. God cannot know all things if by all things we include my personal experiences. God does not have my personal experiences. I tend to think of God as so we're moving on to the next point now. I tend to think of God as possessing the another attribute, namely simplicity. I don't know as I have a good reason for supposing God to be simple, but I do think that he is. By simple, I mean that God is not composed of parts. For example, there is no true distinction between God's mercy and God's justice if he is simple. To say that God is really merciful and really just would be to divide God up into two different parts. So God is simple, I think, not just in the sense of lacking physical parts, arms, legs, and so on, but also he's simple, I think, in terms of lacking what might be called attributive parts. So if I am right, then God is not just per se, or merciful per se. Instead, he is justice merciful, or merciful justice. That is, his justice is essentially merciful, and his mercy is essentially just. You can't divide his mercy and his